Vivien, I'm so excited to have you here today. For those that haven't heard of Vivien Yap before, you're not only our #1 agent, but you're well on track to potentially be #1 in the network this year as well. This is part of our series where we're interviewing our best agents, and it would be absolutely remiss of us not to include you in here. You've flown over from Sydney, from Perth for our elite conference, so thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
So we're going to get straight into it. We've got a short period of time and we want to make sure that we make the most out of all of it. I want to start from the beginning. Obviously, you've come to fruition with this fantastic career, this fantastic team, this fantastic business in the upper echelon of Perth market. But of course, it started very quickly. This idea that when you came out of pharmacy, you're a mother of two, you've had a full career before, but you had exponential growth straight from the beginning. I'm really interested in the idea of the culture of high performance, and it's something that probably comes so naturally to you, but this idea of nature versus nurture. Talk about that first year and I guess, how that felt for you getting started so quickly.
Well, the first year was almost an accidental start to the real estate career because a friend of mine did say to me, let's give you a listing of mine to sell. And I thought, well, why not? And from there, I thought, I'll do this part-time as a part-time hobby. And of course, immediately after I sold the first house, it was an adrenaline rush. And I think it felt good. The second house came to the market because it was a neighbour's home. And out of that, it just came so naturally too. And based on that, I thought I could do this as a full-time career.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny, it creates a little bit of luck to sort of get yourself started, doesn't
Correct.
it? But that being said, off the back of that luck created all of these ideas and I guess the inspiration that sort of led to where you got to. If I recall correctly, only 6 months in, you've started to grow a team already, is that right?
Yes, I always had a personal assistant or a sales assistant from the get-go. But what this lady did for me was just really teaching me because it was my first time in real estate.
Yeah.
I didn't have any help or any understanding of how the process should run. And therefore, with her help, it just made life a little bit easier for me.
And I find this so interesting. Obviously, you come into the industry fresh. Whilst you've had plenty of business acumen, you don't really know much about real estate.
Yes.
And so it kind of questions this idea of the value and importance of skill set. Maybe it's skill set, is it mindset, is it structure? When you reflect back, what was most important to you? And I guess what did you work on the most when it came to kind of getting the ball rolling?
I think it's more to do with experience. It started off as definitely as a skill set that you have to have. You have to be good with people. You have to be genuine when you talk to people. And when I was buying and selling real estate, I could see that in different personalities of each real estate agent. So I know who to buy from, who to sell with, and who not to approach as well.
Funny.
So from there, I did do a lot of investigation myself just to learn the personalities of each agent in my area and what do I want to bring to the table to be unique and to be different. So from there, as a skill set, you learn the skills of each agent and you also learn what experiences you can bring to the table that's different.
I find that so interesting when you're saying what you paid attention to with your competitors or when you wanted to learn, it was more about the personalities that you were dealing with and the experiences, the way that you made people feel. And this is something that inherently, I suppose, is so your brand, is so you, is you make people feel welcome, you're very approachable, very nice, which is obviously such a beautiful trait of yours. Did you find that hard when you first got started? You're in an environment, a sales environment where a lot of the culture is to be very aggressive and to be a little bit more, I guess the exact and opposite of what we've just mentioned. Did you find it difficult to be inherently you when you first got started?
I think so, because I think the first year in real estate, I would come home, I think once a fortnight I'd be crying when I come home. It is a very male-dominated industry as well at that time, but this is about 10 years ago. And just coming to the industry, it does make you feel, am I doing the right thing? Because you're stepping in a totally different role, coming from a pharmacy career to real estate. It is aggressive because you have to stand your ground when you're trying to win a listing and you are competing with real estate agents who've been in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years, who've had good relationships with all these vendors as well. So ideally, I think I had to change. I had to almost walk through those doors and be a different person.
Wow.
And it's quite difficult, but I think there's still a soft side in me. And but it comes through. I think it is real. It is who you are. And if you're being who you are, you'll always do well.
And this is something that's been such a great thing to see, this sort of revolution, for lack of a better word, of these fantastic, strong females coming up through the industry. And you just take a look in the room to the right here, and there's so many great people in Perth and around the country, and New Zealand as well. I guess when you first came in, you obviously had those challenges, but it also set you apart. And a lot of what we're talking about, and I'd love to get into, is how did you buck the trend of not just the Perth marketplace, but the real estate marketplace as a whole? And most interestingly, you started doing it in arguably one of the most competitive and top-end marketplaces in Perth. In terms of breaking into that, I suppose, was this something you had a proactive plan about? This is how I want to be different, this is how I want to be unique, or is it something that I guess you fell into and discovered as you started to get those wins on the board?
Well, I did study the market. I was looking at how many agents would use auction as a process, how many agents would use the offers by a set date as a process, or private treaty. And looking at that, hardly anybody did auctions at the time. And I came from a market where it's very soft, and we've never really had any growth in WA, unfortunately. But it's also the best time for me to sink my teeth in and learn, absorbing like a sponge from all the other agents and all my colleagues around me, and also, of course, from a lot of the trainers who have podcasts. So constantly just absorbing as much as I can. But based on everything that I've learned, I just found that sometimes it is best to utilise a method that's proven, especially in the Sydney market or in the Melbourne market. They do use auctions a lot, but I'm not a pure auction specialist. I do utilise methods to do with offers as well as auctions at the same time. So whichever one works, I will go with it.
So obviously in the Perth marketplace, what makes you really separate is the fact that in your business, it's about 25-30% auction. But in the Perth marketplace, it's only about 5-10% going to auction. Do you find that you use that as a intentional point of difference, or is it really led by the vendor or the client's decision as to what works for them?
It's always led by the vendor as well as the property itself. Number one, it comes down to the median price of that property.
Sure.
Is it going to be a higher price? When it's too high, you do have a lesser demographic to attack and less buy pool. But if we have something that's quite, I suppose the median price is the average median price, that's when we find that there's a lot more buyers. So there's a better chance of engaging a lot more buyers, and therefore competition is built that way. So it really is driven by the vendors as well as the property.
And something I'm so interested in is your ability to drive buyers and create competition, because obviously over the last period of time, Perth's been shut off from not just Australia, but the rest of the world. Access to buyers coming into the Perth marketplace has never been tighter. So have you changed your strategy with how you've created competition and gathered buyers for your properties?
We have done a lot more 3D tours now, which means that people can navigate through each home as if the house is open 24 hours a day. And we have done videos as well for, I'd say 90% of our properties, if the vendors will allow us to do that. Definitely the social media aspect and the internet advertising has assisted us in making sure that the property is presented a lot better. But overall, I think it's to do with the Ray White network as well. We are communicating with a lot more Ray White principals to see if there's anyone coming over. Are they migrating back home? Are they looking for another home? So that has helped me a lot.
Interesting. So relying a lot more on the database and
Yes.
having that network of other sort of high net worth offices that are around the country. That's interesting. Well, let's talk about VPA in particular. You mentioned video, but you take a lot of pride in obviously having a high quality VPA. You put a lot of effort and emphasis into that part of the campaign. Can you talk a wee bit about, I suppose, there's obviously your stock standard. You might have a video, photography, realestate.com, but you do a lot more than that when it comes to preparing a property, don't you?
We have a stylist to assist me and my team in preparing the property for sale. And before we even go to market, we're starting to look at all the minor, like the tiniest amount of repairs and maintenance that's required. It could be a tiny little crack on the wall that people didn't see, or grouting, or just placements of plants or placements of furniture. They just all need to be moved around to create more space. And I think we look at all the potential imperfections that could also come up in each buyer's search for a property. So that helps me a lot in preparing it for sale.
And is that all you, or do you have a team that works alongside you that really assists with that?
Yeah, we have several teams of stylists. So we do have 2 mostly that we normally provide to each vendor. The vendor is allowed to have a quote, of course. It's up to them who they prefer to work with, and sometimes personality clashes will come. You just don't know, because some vendors just don't like to be told what to do, and we totally respect that. So we will make sure if the first one doesn't work, we get the second one coming
100%.
through. So we try and recommend it, but not everybody takes up on that suggestion.
Interesting. I mean, you're dealing with these high net worth buyers, high net worth sellers. Obviously, the demand of your time, the expectations of your service goes substantially up.
Yes.
But that being said, you've always been very proud about your ability to also be able to choose your clients, find people that, I guess, work and merge with, I guess, your mentality, your team, your approach. Have you found it difficult, especially as you've had to let go of listings potentially because maybe they're not saleable, maybe the vendor's not listening, maybe the relationship doesn't work anymore? Can you talk about how we set those expectations and what you look for in creating the perfect team with your clients?
Well, I suppose some vendors expect different things, but I think the moment you meet them, you just need to explain to them how you and your team works. Let them know your job description and let them know what your team does. And the more involved they are in the whole process, understanding what you are bringing to the table, they will also understand we have a bigger team, meaning more buyers, a lot more work gets done, more efficiency will take place as well.
And the interesting thing is, over the years, I mean, you've obviously always understood that the bigger the dream, the bigger the team. You've always been very proactive about growing your team. But as I've learned from my time with you is the better you've gotten, I guess, the less work you do in terms of the lanes are very clear as to what are your roles, what are your team roles. So as you've started to get to this point where you're doing more than 100 transactions per annum, what are the core focuses that you focus on, and what are the major time suckers that you try and delegate?
My main role is to list the property, to sell the property by negotiating the best price for the owner, and that's really what they always do say, we want the best price for your property or for my property. So ultimately, my team will be the admin team. So they would, of course, book all the photography, book all the advertising. They will load all the properties up. And we do have a team member who's matching up the buyers as well for me.
So you have a full-time buyer's agent, buyer's matcher.
A buyer's matcher, buyer's manager, ultimately.
Fantastic.
So that helps us a lot because they also know all my buyers too. I do work with a lot of my agents in my team as well. So we have a very cohesive family of agents where we trust each other completely. So we know if it's their buyer, we will always make sure that they also get a conjunctional fee as well.
Love that.
So immediately they understand the relationship they have with that buyer. The buyer is more likely to understand what we want from them because they trust their advisor. Their most trusted advisor is maybe the conjunctional agent as well. So ultimately we will get multiple buyers fighting for that property, and you do get the better price.
And I would love to unpack this buyer work a little bit more because it's obviously becoming so much more important now. The last few years not much stock, a lot of buyer demand. It's fair to say that perhaps not in your team, but in the marketplace, the relevance and the importance of the buyer has diminished as an industry. And already, especially in the Eastern Seaboard, especially in New Zealand, the value of keeping a buyer confident, comfortable, and creating a little bit of urgency there, it's just a real skill set that needs to be honed. Do you mind talking about the specifics about, I guess, how you do all of the above there with your team, especially with that buyer runner work?
I think with my buyer that we are hunting for one specific property doesn't fall into one specific category. I think each home will appeal to different buyer categories in different aspects. It depends on who, and what are they looking for. But based on my experience is that I get to know my buyers, let's say at the home opens. And we always ask the question, what are you looking for? Do you have to sell before you buy? So we tend to have a little look in to what they own or where they live. And if we have a good snapshot of how they live or what they're looking for in the next upgrade, it will already give us a very good information background of what we really need to hunt for them. That's all downloaded into my diary, so they will translate all that information back into Vault, which is our database system. So we then know exactly how much they need to spend for the next home, what is a trade up price. So all of that is unpacked for the team, so they then will hunt for the next property. And I'll share that. Yeah.
I love this point so much because, again, what we're actually learning so much more about the buyer is, again, I'm just seeing so many sort of points where you're looking at things slightly different than what everyone else would be. For you, it's more about identify the lifestyle choices that they're trying to achieve, identify what's important with their current lives and how can we upgrade that or assimilate that to their new property. And it's so much more than just budget. Is that fair to say?
Correct, yes.
100%.
And sometimes even they can't afford it, they may own some shares they have to sell or ask their mum and dad to help them for their little gap. And it just makes a difference understanding holistically what they really need.
The whole picture.
It's not just a tunnel vision process.
What an interesting take. So again, I think about that from one of the first comments you made when you went and took a look. It could be too easy to look about the marketing, but it's so much more about the personalities and so much about how you make people feel. And we had an interview a couple of months ago with Kevin Choksky in Victoria that shared a very similar idea that these buyers obviously become all of your future clients, and the way you make them feel throughout this transaction is usually what brings your next lead in. Is that much the same with you as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I was working with a buyer who migrated from Adelaide to Perth, and I was really trying to sell them a property, and I worked really hard, and I honestly believed they were going to buy this property from me. And all that buyer work just went out the window when they didn't buy from me. And I thought, oh no, I've lost that opportunity. But funnily enough, 2 years later, they rang me up. They said, we would like to use you as our selling agent. I said, oh, that's fantastic. And they said, we saw how hard you followed us up, and we saw how hard you pushed us to get to a property, to decide on a property. And I thought, that's good. So I did ask for the business, said, is there anything that could stop you from working from me this time? And because we didn't do business last time, they said, no, you've got a pretty good chance, but they still keep me waiting.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to ask for the business, and that's when you do get the business.
And when we're talking about this, I think as you've grown in your confidence, as you've grown in your profile, as you've grown in your status inside the industry, it's been really interesting the ways that you've been able to be creative with how you've been able to ask for the business, and especially this idea of asking for fee, the idea of protecting that fee, and also really pushing the idea of getting VPA skin in the game as well. Do you mind talking about some of the ways we do get creative? Do you use performance kickers in your business?
Yeah, I do, and I do leave it to the vendor to decide, because we do have the agreement in place, and we also have annexures in place that we show them as well, and it's up to them. There's nothing that we don't share, with the whole team. So if we sort of work on a target that we feel it's achievable, that's the appraised price, obviously, but anything above, it's up to them if they wish to pay us a bonus, and I welcome all bonuses, of course.
But it's an exciting idea, the idea of getting your vendors on board with this idea that, okay, here's the logical price.
Yes.
If we can achieve this premium, if we can follow this process, and if I can get my team to get you an outstanding result, like really encouraging the team to get that amazing result, well, there's the extra reward at the end of the tunnel as well.
Yes, absolutely. And plus, they see it as an insurance. Each vendor sees it as an insurance towards the final sale price.
The fact that you're fighting for that top price, not just using that to get the listing.
Correct. And I think when they see that as an insurance to say, look, I will not sell it unless I get a minimum of X amount of dollars. So you sell that process, and we do have a whole team that is working towards getting the bonus fee as well. And it's a higher fee that can be shared with other agents too. So they would work.
Good point, because you chase those conjunctionals as well if you need to. Fantastic point.
And sometimes, we've been lucky a few times where not only we have a very, good selling fee, but on top of it, it was such a good bonus that it was almost like selling maybe 2 properties at the same time. Instead of selling 2, selling 1.
And you're quite transparent in the listing table about this idea of we welcome conjunctions, we want conjunctions, we search for conjunctions. If the best buyer is with this agent down the road, there's going to be no reason why we're not going to share the profits with them as well if it's going to get you a better price.
Absolutely, and we're very transparent about that.
Yeah.
So even if the buyer's been working with me for a while, but that buyer has a better relationship with my agent in my other office, I will still allow the conjunctional to happen.
It's that true abundance mentality, right? That if you actually create the best result, you're actually going to get a better outcome for you and for your client as well, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to quickly move into this next point. You obviously work very hard. You work a lot of hours. I'm not sure if you don't remember this, but when we first met, one of the first questions you asked me was, Tim, how many hours do you work? And I had to think about it. It's a good thing, but that being said, it kind of comes back to our opening question around performance culture. This is obviously an environment that you create. It's an environment you feel comfortable in. And it's an environment that requires a lot of support, because as a mother of 2, can you talk about the support network of the family, how you get them to buy into this idea of what you're achieving, and I suppose how they get on board and you can make it something that they're really on board with and support you for as well?
Yeah, I think if you want to be on the number 1 team, they would expect a level of hard work. And the level of hard work is not about just being busy. They need to be productive. So a lot of people can say, I work 38 hours, but are they really doing the hours of a 38-hour job? Or are they only doing 20 hours and then the rest of the time they're on social media and just doing stuff? And that doesn't work for me because I am very time poor. So I think as a mum, you just need to make sure you are super organised. You have to have a schedule, you have to roster, everything is in the calendar, so you know that there are items that needs to be ticked off as a task. So anyone who's in my team, they do have their own job description, but we also need to look at their strengths and their weaknesses. And opportunities will exist for each person because I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. So as a way to work, it's like a yin and yang. So positives, negatives, and we just find the next person who will actually fill in the gap. We still are tweaking constantly. There's not a single moment that I say that my team's perfect at all.
I would love to focus really on the mother aspect, right, and the family aspect, because, I see on social media all the time, obviously you're a very proud mother, and what are the non-negotiables that you sort of have with your family that allow you to sort of stay connected with them whilst staying focused at work?
It's very hard. I don't feel it's ever balanced, but I try my absolute best. I mean, we do have a group chat between me and my family, which we call it Mummy and my boys, including my husband. So he's one of the boys. However, whatever we do, we try and make sure that we're keeping each other up to date throughout, let's say, the day or the night. And I do work super long hours at the moment, and that's because it's harder to get the business markets, it's pretty tight with stock. So you're fighting really hard to get the business, and usually when you're negotiating, I'm in my car. I will not go into the house because I don't want them to listen to my conversation. I don't bring work home, and that's something that I've always believed in. So they don't see that side. I do want them to see me as, you know, the mummy, the wife, you know, who's always available to talk to them.
Being present is just so important.
Yeah, I think not just being present, but just really be there for them where I am in tune with what they're up to. But they do cook for me. They help me a lot. My boys are amazing. They prep the food, and I will get a photo from my husband and say, photo time, is really when dinner time is being, ready. Take a photo of the dinner and say, Mummy, come up, eat dinner. So I do have chores and roles that I provide to my kids. So that's a non-negotiable. So to make the family run smoothly.
So you've obviously achieved so much, and you continue to achieve so much. You know, every year that you've been part of the network, you've continued to grow your business. What is it that drives you now? You've got arguably nothing left to prove. So what is it that makes you want to keep growing the business, or is it just something that organically continues to happen because of, you know, the work that you've achieved so far?
I think with me, I have a very patient ambition, and I think the patience is there, but I also know that the ambition is there to drive me further. I know that I'm not going to be the best of the best, but I'd like to be at least on top of my game, above average. I really always believe that. And when I left pharmacy, I really was so driven to not fail in my next career. Number one, it's a hobby. You know, I do enjoy what I do so much, and with a bit of passion combined with a bit of your ambition, it will always, drive you to success, no matter how you define success. So success for someone is to probably make a lot of money. I think for me, in my age now, I feel that success is to spend a lot more time at home, spend a lot more time also doing the things that I really want to do, choose my clients very, very well, and ensuring that the work that I do will bring joy back to my family. Yeah.
Love that. Last question, because you've always been so generous with your time. I'm always really interested with the advice you now give to the team that you're developing. You've obviously got a whole business underneath you, and you've got a lot of upcoming developing agents, guys, girls inside the business. You know, you've learned so much, the experience you now impart to these guys to be successful. What are the main things that you tell someone when they first get started in your business that you think it takes to be successful?
I believe anything is possible, because I look at how I started. I started with nothing, but I didn't actually have a full expectation of what it takes to be a good agent. So I just go with the flow, and I did go with the flow initially, but I think my flow was quite a snowball effect that sort of landed on my feet. And I think, don't be fearful of failure. You're only successful if you understand what you've done has caused, let's say, a supposed failure. But I look at every failure as a potential next success.
Amazing. Well, Vivien, you're such an inspiration, not just to women inside the industry, but to all of the people that are standing there, and you'll obviously be speaking with them shortly as well. Thank you for being so generous with your time. We know we appreciate that. And of course, we wish you nothing but success moving forward. Thank you. Until next time, we'll see you noon.
Thank you.